You're listening to the Just Press Pause podcast with Andrew Kozak.
Well, this has been a pretty busy week for the podcast. Finally got myself up on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple iTunes, or Apple Podcasts as it's now called. And of course, the video versions are always available on my YouTube page at youtube.com/Andrew Kozak TV. Hey, I'm super excited about some upcoming guests that I have booked for Just Press Pause. A couple of really great people with some really interesting stories to tell, even a couple of celebrities you might recognize. So great stuff coming your way. And of course, I'm also working on some great water cooler weather topics that will return next episode as well. For right now, we're going to give you part 2 of my interview with Miss Molly, former nationally syndicated hostess of the show Romper Room, talking a little bit more about some great memories from that show, which lasted from 1981 through 1987 in syndication. So you had an unscripted show for the most part. You had a rundown of what you had to do each day or what you wanted to do each day. And I know that there were crew and behind the scenes people there, but it was kids. So a lot of times, a lot of that could be unpredictable, as some of my clips can show you. Do you have any specific memories of something that you were like, oh my God?
Well, there was one little boy, the only little boy that we ever asked to not come back, and it broke my heart. But it was because he kept running off the set and over onto the hill and jumping off the hill. And I was afraid that he would hurt himself. That one happened when we weren't live. So we could, we'd go cut and then we'd have to start again. But, on a whole, the children were all really very well behaved. I mean, think about it. You'd watched me on television, and then you came and boom, there I was, real. So, and I'm sure that every parent gave you will listen to Miss Molly, you will not do what you're not, there was, so we had very few incidences, very few with children who might be a problem. If adults came to the show, then we might have more.
Right. I was going to say.
More than the kids. Animals all the time. Yeah. If there was an animal there was going to be something weird to go on. Occasionally, often we would have circus clowns come in from Ringling Brothers. I became very, very good friends with several of the Ringling Brothers circus. We'd always have an advanced clown that came every year. And I became very good friends with them. I had the opportunity to go and do several things with the circus. I was a guest ringmaster. I was a guest clown. I got to ride an elephant.
I kind of remember that, actually. I think it was advertised.
And every once in a while, there'd be a child who was afraid of whoever the clown was. So we'd have to work through that. It always worked out well because the clowns, the one who came the most was Cowboy Mike. Cowboy Mike, okay. Loved and adored him. God rest his soul. Yes. I love Cowboy Mike. So sometimes that would be an issue. Occasionally, if there were my favorite story of, we had Barbara, who used to come from the Turtleback Zoo, and she'd always bring an animal. And sometimes that would be an issue. Well, one day she came to the show. I was standing in the studio, and I had my back to her when she came in, and she said, "Hey, Molly," and I turned around and went, "Hi, Barbara," and she said, "Here, hold this," and she handed me a 7-foot boa constrictor.
Oh.
And then left the room.
Oh, without any prior instructions or?
Nope. She handed me Victor, put him in my arms. Now, we knew each other very well. I think she knew it was safe to do that with me, that I'd done a lot with these animals. And she left the room. And there I was standing with Victor. And then when she came back, I asked her, I said, "Barbara, why did you do that?" And she said, "Well, if I had said to you, 'Here, hold Victor,' you would have immediately gone, whoa, and then we would have had to deal with your fears." She says, "I knew that if I handed it to him and I knew you well enough that you would get it." And she said, "I can't have any reaction from you of fear in front of the children.
Wow. See, that's something that you never think about. Just look at, yeah, because you have to put on a certain,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, because then they're all going to be scared. I wouldn't even think about that.
Yeah. We had one incident where when it was live on tape, now I never watched myself,
Hmm.
but one day I was home and I thought, well, I'll watch and, see what I can learn from myself. And unbeknownst to me, it was a day with this, I think it was the same young man that we eventually had to ask to leave. We're
You
playing
got
a
to find
game.
this guy.
I remember his name too. I'm not going to say it though. We, we were playing a game called Do You See? And I had a red dress on. And I had an arrangement with the director that if things were too wild, I would look straight at the camera and he would come tight to me and then we would cut to commercial. Well, unbeknownst to me, and I was, I did kind of mess with the children a lot. I said, do you see anything red? And of course, I had a red dress on. The little boy said, that's red. And I went, no, this is purple. And I held the dress up like this, looking at the camera, thinking he was going in tight. Well, the little boy went down in between my legs and looked up in between my legs, and John widened out the shot.
Oh.
So I was sitting at home seeing this and going,
You were like mortified. Like, how did they air that?
how did that stay in? Why didn't you cut that?
Oh, wow.
And I called him immediately. Well, they actually sent that to the Dick Clark organization. It wound up on the Life's Most Embarrassing Moments, and those kids do the craziest things. It was a show.
Hmm.
Wound up on one night on Johnny Carson, and
Wow.
all my friends were calling me. Was that you? Was that you? Was that you?
That's
And that was
hysterical.
their
That's
only.
that is a story a lot of people, I'm sure, have never heard or would have ever thought would have occurred. That's really
I
funny.
think I have a copy of that clip that I can get to if you wanted to, because it's pretty darn.
That would be pretty
It's
amazing,
pretty,
actually. I think a lot of people would appreciate that. That's hysterical. Okay, so it went off the air in 1987. What has life been like since then for you?
well, right after that, I stayed work. I was, of course, expecting my first child.
Mhm.
The station was delightful. They said that they had something they wanted me to do in the spring, but I worked as a producer on a show called People Are Talking right after that,
Huh.
which was I loved the other people on the show, but it was definitely not Miss Molly type show. I guess I can share this. My first show that I had to produce was Safe Sex with Dr. Ruth Westheimer.
Oh, talk about going from one end of the spectrum to the
So
other.
there I was at my desk calling parents, telling them that their kids can't be on Romper Room, and on the other side trying to fill the slots for that show. It was,
Oh, wow.
my brain kind of went through some crazy
Yeah,
time.
talk about balance. I mean, it really is a 180-degree turnaround.
Fortunately, I only produced on that show for about 6 months, and then I had Charlie. And after Charlie, there was a show on CNBC. It was nationally syndicated, and it was called KTV. And I did that show for a while. That was a talk show for kids between the ages of 8 and 14. And I was one of 3 hosts on that show. It was short-lived. It was about a year and a half, and that was fun. And then I went back to Channel 9 because they had called me and they tried a thing in the newsroom to do live commercials.
Huh.
And I had put on, baby weight
Like they
after.
had done in the 60s, you mean?
This was a live commercial during the news at
Oh.
noon. And they called me and said, and one of the friends of mine was in the sales department. He said, I have something delicate to ask you. And I said, what? He goes, well, Nutrisystem wants to know whether you would go on the program and do live commercials during the news. And I said, wait a minute, you're going to pay me to lose that baby weight? Yeah, I'm all over that. You got it. I'll do it. And I went on the Nutrisystem plan, and Charlie and at that point, he was about 2.5, 3. We'd get in the car every day and drive to the station. And during the news at noon, Lloyd Lindsay Young, the
Hello. That
weatherman,
guy, yeah.
would go, hello, Molly. And I
Yeah.
would do a 90-second live Nutrisystem commercial.
That's incredible.
Charlie, it was
Wow.
wild. And then they had me do a bunch of I did some other commercials, and then I was expecting Richard.
Mhm.
And so then I had my second child, Richard. So now I've got Charlie and Richard. And just as I was getting ready to potentially go back to work again, along came Mary and then Bridget. And I found myself the mother of four.
And your life
And
got even busier than you ever imagined it would be.
it most certainly did. And I got to
Yeah.
tell you, I thought at the time, I'm going to be the perfect mother. I'm Miss Molly, for goodness sakes.
Right.
Well, motherhood is much harder than it was just going in every day to be the Romper Room lady.
I follow you on Instagram, and you're all into food and recipes and sharing. And I think now, especially for anybody that's watching this or listening to this after the pandemic, congratulations, you made it through. Great. For everybody that's listening as we do it, I think now is so important, to be honing those cooking skills, doing those things, spending time with family.
One of the things that I love about the Pampered Chef is it was started to teach people how to be able to create a meal and bring their family around the table.
Hmm.
Because those conversations that go on around the dining room table are incredibly important. But the stress of getting that meal prepared is kind of frustrating for a lot of people. So I grew up, I love to cook, and I've always loved to cook. So that was a way of using another one of my loves, and there's presentation skills involved. When I used to go into people's homes, now I love it even more because I can just go live from my kitchen
Right.
via this vehicle and share recipes and teach recipes, and people are in need of learning how to do it themselves because
Yeah.
a lot of people don't do that, and I really enjoy sharing that. It's fun. pamperedchef.com slash PWS, as in personal website, slash Molly B.
Okay. And I'll put that up on the screen for anybody watching
Yeah.
on YouTube.
Or
Yeah.
they can see me on my Instagram, which is
Yeah.
Miss Molly's Kitchen. And is Instagram's Miss Molly's Mirror.
Miss
I
Molly's
always
Mirror.
Instagram is Miss Molly's Mirror. On Facebook, I have a group called Miss Molly's Kitchen.
Okay, and we're going to put all the links up there. But I'm glad you said Miss Molly's Mirror, because before we wrap up, and we've got one more segment, which is rapid fire, which we'll ask a couple questions. I would
Okay.
love to see those mirrors, because and for anybody that's watching, and I'll obviously have the video up, and if not, if you're just listening to this, I'll just explain. At the end of every Romper Room, Miss Molly would take the magic mirror. She would kind of wrap up and see how everybody's doing, and she would have names and read people's names. And it was through the power of television. You would be sitting there in front of the TV, just glued to it, waiting for your name to be called. With a name like Andrew, I've heard it before,
Mm-hmm.
but I think less common names, people were just like keeping their ears peeled. So you have those actual mirrors you just showed.
Yep.
How did it work?
There were two. Well, you can see this is a chroma key green.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hold up the first mirror and I would say the poem, Romper, Stomper, Bumper, Boo, tell me, do, magic mirror, tell me today, did all my friends have fun at play? And they, of course, would do a chroma key effect, and the screen would go, and then I would pull the other mirror up, and I would say all the names. And the children sitting there would be, so that was the secret that they learned. And the number one thing that people say to me the most is, you never saw me in the magic mirror. I hear it all the time. And, I've learned an awful lot from this mirror, is that little child who wanted to be seen has grown into an adult who wants to be seen as well.
Yeah.
And the more that we can see each other and actually use people's names. So, when we get out of this and we're allowed to get out and about, or even now, we go to the grocery store, we go to places where there are people, the first responders and the people who are still working, use their names, thank them.
Yeah.
People have name tags on, so use names, because people want to be seen and they want to hear their name. Because at the end, I would always say, after the end of the list of names, and I would always say, and I see you. So technically, I saw everybody every day, but people wanted to hear their names.
Yeah. That was, everybody loved the show, but it was that last just minute and a half, however long it went, that people were I just remember being glued to it. And I'm sure, generations of kids from those that watched you to those that watched the ones in the 50s and 60s. And yeah, that was a very special, very, very special time in that show. Rapid fire. It's a segment that I've been doing with my guests here. Number one
Okay.
is, what is the number one absolute thing that you miss right now that you can't do because of the pandemic?
Oh, hug my children.
Yeah.
My son is just on the other side of town, and when he comes to see me, we've gone for a walk, but we have to keep social distancing.
Yeah.
My other daughter's in Arkansas, my other daughter's somewhere else here in New Jersey. So hugging them is
Yeah.
the number one thing I miss.
Sooner than later.
Yeah.
We're all hoping. Okay, so a lot more time at home. That's what all of us are doing. Are you binge watching anything these days that you'd like to share?
Oh, let's see. What? Yeah, we actually are. We totally the show that I only binged. I can't remember the name of it. It's about the knights. It was some kind of knights. They were knights back in the day. I can't remember the name of it, but that one we totally binged. I'm thoroughly enjoying now Mrs. America, which is about the ERA back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Not binging that because that comes. I had to binge it to catch up.
To catch up to the current, yeah, because I saw an ad for it, yeah.
And I have to wait a week. The acting is brilliant. The costumes are brilliant. It's wonderful performances. Really great. I love The Marvelous Miss Maisel, but now we got to wait.
I just started. I'm a late bloomer when it comes to that. Everybody talked about Game of Thrones. I finally watched Game of Thrones like right up to the very end. Miss Maisel,
Love it.
everybody kept saying it. Everybody kept saying, you got to watch it. You got to watch it. And then I did. And that first season, I thought it was, I was laughing my butt off. It was hysterical.
Yeah. Very well done. Great costumes, great lighting, great performances. I saw the first 15 minutes of Game of Thrones and the last 15 minutes of Game of Thrones.
You missed a lot of very, very important.
I saw the first 15 minutes and said, nah, this isn't for me. But my daughter was still home then and all about watching the end. So I came down to watch the last 15 minutes. So I always thought that was kind of cool that I saw the first 15 minutes and I saw the last 15 minutes.
There are so many things that happen in between if you ever decide to, yeah. Okay, here's my last question for you, because so much of what you did was centered around music, the songs.
My husband's standing in the door.
We'll get her back to you in just a second, I promise.
I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. You sang so many songs that I remember. In fact, you were live on Instagram last week or the week before, and I said the alphabet song because that was stuck in my head when I finally realized that I found the tape and I could go and talk to you. Did you come up with those songs? Did you write them?
No, those were written by David Spangler. David Spangler wrote those. And in fact, David Spangler is instrumental as to why I got the job of Romper Room. When I was in New York for the opening of Night Riders, one of the actresses who was in Night Riders took me to meet David. And David said to me, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to move to New York and, audition because I'm an actress. But someday I'd like to open my own children's theater. And he said, you like children? I said, oh, absolutely. I love children. He says, you'd be perfect for Romper Room. I said, what? He says, I'm writing music for their newest version of Romper Room. I'm going to tell them about you. And that's how I got the audition that led to 2 weeks worth of, if you listen to my podcast, I actually didn't share that either. My daughter and I have a podcast called Mirrored.
Mirrored, okay.
Mirrored. And I tell the whole story about how I got the job of Romper Room on Mirrored. But David wrote all of those. And the alphabet, I remember, but someone said something the other day about, and maybe it was you with the alphabet, because I hadn't sung it in forever.
Yeah.
And I started singing it again. Alphabet, you think it's easy. Alphabet, you think it's fun. The alphabet, you get you
anything you can eat. Yeah.
Bet you every letter's a treat. Albert ate an apple. Betty bit a bun. Carrie chewed a carrot. Danny's donuts done. Eddie eats Easter eggs. Flo likes fish a lot. And I hadn't thought of any of those lyrics in years.
Well, if you forget them, they're on the episode I was on. So when I'm going to upload that entire to YouTube, because it's also, that's the last thing I was going to say, is the question that a lot of people had asked me was, can we find old episodes? And I've looked, and I think I know you're shaking your head. The answer I know is going to be no.
anyone who was on the shows in Baltimore, those are available still. There's VHS tapes running around, but unless somebody else did a VHS of it and threw it up on YouTube, it's not.
And there's very little available there.
I think that's one of the reasons I'm more recognizable than a lot of the other Romper Room teachers, is because of VHS and people have loaded them up to YouTube.
Yeah.
So when people think of Romper Room, they think that it's Miss Molly, but there were so many other people before me and at the same time as me. So there was Miss Socorro out in LA. There was Miss Fran in Canada. She and I have become friends on Facebook, which is really so there were other Romper Room teachers, but for some reason, because of YouTube, I tend to be, and I was the last, one of the last. I tend to be a little more recognizable. But Absolutely. No, you can't get them. They're gone.
Yeah, I know it's a sad thing. Nowadays, working in a TV station myself, you can go back. Everything's digitized and archived. But I know back then, even when I started in, I was interning. I interned for Sam Champion in New York, Channel 7, back in 2003. And
big Sam Champion fan.
He's a great guy. It gave me my first start in television, but, well, you technically did, but in TV weather. But even back then, they were using, that was 2003. They were using super VHS tapes, those giant like beta-like tapes. And you can't find a lot of that stuff archived anymore. But nowadays, it's all digital. Miss Molly, thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot tell you how much of a pleasure it was talking to somebody that, honestly, and I think I speak for everybody that was on the show and everybody that grew up watching the show, you had such an influence on our lives when it came to just education and learning and blossoming into kids.
It's so kind of you to say that, and I'm always overwhelmed when I meet someone who was on the show, and the fact that they even remember blows my mind. But that people remember so fondly is such a gift for me. At the time, I had no idea what a gift I had. That was my job. I went to work every day. I did my job. But now, when I meet people, and what's really fun is adults turn into 5-year-olds before my very eyes when they meet me. They're like, it's so fun to watch. And I see it a little bit in your face. I see that 5-year-old that you turn into. And I hope that adults now who remember that can remember that child. Because when we go back to remember the innocence and the hope and the wide-eyed optimism of the child within, I hope that people can relive that again. And it's a gift to me that you and anyone else remembers. Blows my mind.
It was a gift to us to have you in our lives and that show in our lives growing up. Again, Miss Molly, thank you so much. Keep in touch, and maybe there'll be another version that
Who knows?
That will, as we move into the future.
If I do create this digitized, Miss Molly, come to Miss Molly's house, we're going to have somebody teach us about weather. So maybe we'll be able to figure something out and see if that works.
I am all up for that. Miss Molly, thank you so much. Take care and appreciate it. That's a wrap on this episode of the Just Press Pause podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or anywhere else, make sure to check out the video versions at youtube.com/AndrewKozakTV, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.